Guys, it's Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. One thing that we have to be concerned about is how visible are we as motorcyclists? As we've all know, and we've probably heard before, when somebody pulls out in front of us, they often say, "I didn't even see you." Well, there's a lot of reasons that happens, but there's some things that we can do to make sure that we are as visible as possible when we're out on the road. So to demonstrate our lack of visibility, I turned off all the lights, and I want to point out where we are visible and where we aren't visible on these Harley Davidson touring motorcycles. So obviously up here in the front we have headlights, we have turn signals, pretty visible from the front. Then we can move to the back, right? We have lights all over the back of this bike. We have a stop and brake light back here. I have filler lights here. I have lights up underneath my bags, but even if you're stock, you have a lot of lighting from the rear. So what does that leave? That leaves the side of the bike really not visible from cars that are coming at us from the side. All we really have is a reflector here on the bag latches, and we have a reflector on the forks, which some people actually even take those off, even further reducing visibility. So now that we've got the lights back on, what we're going to do in today's video is actually address that vulnerability from the side and add some lighting to these latches and these forks with some great plug-and-play Custom Dynamics products. And we'll get into all that right after this. So the first vulnerability we'll address is actually these fork reflectors right here. These come stock. DOT required, so all your Harley Davidsons will have these. A lot of people actually remove these, and really if you think about it, it's kind of a passive lighting, right? If a headlight happens to flash that, you'll get a little bit of light for just a quick second. But what we're going to do is actually take those off and replace those with these fork lights from Custom Dynamics. These are actually a plug-and-play option. They will run in amber and flash in amber as well. These are actually black on the side, and the lens is actually smoked. You can also get these, I believe, in an amber lens or chrome if you have chrome forks. So we'll remove these and begin the install on this. All right, so before you actually remove these, obviously you want to make sure this is clean. This actually is clean. I actually got some chips already in this powder coat. But you're going to want to get some painter's tape like this. And what we're going to do is outline the top in here so that when we remove this, we know where the new one is exactly going to go on and be placed on the fork, so that it lines up just as if it were the stock reflector. All right, so I've got the painter's tape on here to get my alignment. So you may need to use a little pry tool like this, a plastic. Don't use a screwdriver because you could mess up this powder coat or your chrome if you have chrome forks. And you may want to even heat this up with a hairdryer or a heat gun, just to get that 3M adhesive a little looser. Oftentimes I found I can usually get this pry tool right underneath there, and these will pop right off. And then if there's a little extra goo on here from the adhesive, I'll use a 3M adhesive remover and it takes it right off. All right, so I just put my pry tool in there, and you can see that came off almost completely clean. All of the adhesive stayed right on the back of this. So this is pretty much ready. I use no heat, just pop this in here and began to pry it, and that thing popped right off, clean as a whistle. And then we're pretty much ready to begin applying the Custom Dynamics fork light on here, and then I'll show you how we do the rest from there. So it's pretty easy to determine which one is right and left. Essentially you want this cable toward the top of this light so that it can run up the side here along this cable here for your brakes, and this angle is exactly the same as what we marked out from the stock reflector, so it will go on something like this. Before we actually put this on the bike, I'm going to go ahead and activate this. You can either scratch this with your fingernail, I'll use my pry tool, or you can put a little bit of heat to it. All right, so I've activated that. I've gotten this to begin to peel back a little bit. So just peel it back far enough so that you have enough room to get this lined up at the top here, and begin to just sort of lay that up against your tape. As you're going down, just peel that down. And I've got it on there. So now just kind of press and hold that for about 30 to 60 seconds to get that 3M tape to adhere onto that fork tightly. So next what we need to do is actually take this nut, and then there's one up here that you can't see that's behind the fairing, but essentially that's holding this turn signal mounting bracket onto the bike. We need to loosen that up because we need to get to the wiring for this turn signal so that we can connect into that, so that the turn signal and the fork light that we have down below will operate in unison. This is actually 1/2 inch, so we'll go ahead and loosen this up. This top one, let's bust those loose and remove those. So now that we've got that turn signal completely taken off of the mounting points, we're going to go ahead and disconnect that turn signal, because we'll actually be putting a Y splitter onto this so that we can connect the wiring from the fork light and this turn signal. So in the kit you'll get 2 of these Y connectors. So the portion that has the blue wiring up here, you'll actually want to route up here, and then this one will actually connect into the OEM harness. This portion will actually plug into the OEM turn signal, and then you'll have this one in the back, which will connect actually to the fork light turn signal that's down here. We got this routed. Let's go ahead and connect that fork light up to this connection here to make sure that this is all operating as it should. So we've got that connected. Let's turn on the bike, and you can see that fork light lights up. Now let's just make sure we got turn signals, and that works appropriately. So now that we know that this is operating appropriately, I'm going to go ahead and get this wiring taken care of. We're going to just zip tie this along this brake line. And once I get this wiring routed along this brake line, I get everything kind of connected up here to make sure we don't have any loose wires. We'll go ahead and reconnect the turn signal and make sure everything is operating as it should. All right, so I've got all the wiring connected back up in here. We've got this now connected back into the bike. I've got those acorn nuts on there. I need to torque that down with the 1/2 inch socket. But now let's turn the bike on. I need to do a little more wire management. I'll get that kind of all tied up in there and turn these on and make sure everything is working appropriately. So running, amber, bright white. And then our turn signals. As you can see, they're synced up. We've got the amber turn, amber's flash on both of these. Now let's do our 4-way flashers. Everything seems to be running appropriately. In this case, I don't need to do sort of a BCM sync. Sometimes if you don't have LEDs here and you add these, you do need to run that BCM sync, but in this case, these have been on here for quite some time, so no need to do that. All right, so there you have it. We've just got the one fork light on the front there, and as you can see, we've already got light coming up there in the front. Now there's with the flashers. You may not be able to see, but that fork light is actually flashing as well. In the dark here in the garage, the camera's probably not picking it up as well as it should, but again, much more light. If I'm looking at this from behind the camera here, the bike is lit up much more than it was before. All right guys, so we got the fork lights on. That's going to be a great improvement, but I think the biggest improvement is going to come when we get these latch lights on. So to start this project, we need to release this tether so that we can actually get to the saddlebag latch here. So these are 2 bolts here that we need to take out, and those are T15. So just get your Torx bit, T15, and these shouldn't be super tight because that's just going into plastic. So we'll remove one. And don't lose those little T15s. Kind of hold that saddlebag lid, because as soon as you release that tether, that bag can just fall straight down. All right, so next we need to remove these 3 bolts here, and I believe those are T15s as well. And now we'll actually release the latch. Then we'll get this last T15 out. Hold that latch a little bit, because obviously once that bolt comes out, that screw comes out, the latch is going to want to fall to the ground, so you don't want to get it scratched. So I'll reach under. So we got this latch cover off. We need to get this reflector out of here. In order to do that, we actually have to drill a hole here to be able to pry that reflector out. And the way you do that is actually with this little template. I don't know if it'll show up in the camera or not, but Custom Dynamics supplies this template that'll go on here, And then what you do is line that up with the shape of the inside of this latch. Then you mark that with a marker, and that will mark the spot where you actually drill your holes. All right, so there you see I've got my hole marked with that template. And now what I'm actually going to do is drill a hole into that using a 1/4 inch bit to get that started. So I'm going to go right in the middle of that. And then once we actually get this pried out, we'll have to drill and expand that hole for the actual cable that will come through. So I've got my 1/4 inch drill bit put into my drill. I'm going to hold this thing steady until it hits the actual reflector. So if you go too far, that's what's going to happen. So essentially now I just got to pry this out. Again, it's got that 3M adhesive on there. And whatever adhesive I don't get off of there, I'm actually going to use that 3M adhesive remover, and I'll show you that. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to use it on these. Typically I do have to. So I'm going to use my pry tool, get that under there, pry this thing out, and we'll show you what we got. So I got the reflector off. So that's all of the 3M adhesive I need to get off there. So I'm going to just spray some 3M adhesive remover on there and let that sit, and then use my pry tool, plastic, so I don't scratch this paint. And you don't want to use anything abrasive, because if you keep scrubbing, you'll get these edges dulled up around here. So just use that 3M adhesive remover, or the other option is, again, use a hair dryer or your heat gun, heat that up, and then you can kind of peel that off. But what I found is actually the 3M adhesive remover works pretty well. So this is the 3M adhesive remover that I'm going to use. I bought a can of this because I do a lot of these projects. Comes in this aerosol can. I think I actually got this off Amazon, but this is the one that I use that works really well. So I'm going to go ahead and spray that on that adhesive. And just let this set for a while to eat that up. So I let that adhesive remover sit on there for a little bit. I'm just going to scrape with my pry tool here, this plastic pry tool, and that should eventually get all this adhesive off of here, because you need to have that perfectly clean so that when we stick the Custom Dynamics light on there, it has good adhesion to the actual latch itself. All right, so after a little bit of work, a little bit of scrubbing, I got all of that adhesive off there. Then you want to make sure this is completely dry, and either wipe it down with an alcohol pad to make sure you have all of that 3M adhesive remover off there, so it doesn't eat into the new adhesive that you're going to put on there with the Custom Dynamics light that's going to go in there. Gotten it all cleaned up. The next thing we need to do is actually expand this hole. We're going to use our 3/8 inch drill bit. And that is really so that the cabling and the wire for the actual light can go through this. So I'm going to hold this steady and carefully drill this out. You can see we've got the 3/8 inch hole there. Just get all the burrs off there. All right, so now that I got my hole drilled in there, I can feed the wiring through from the actual light itself. Then push it in there, and you can see dry fit, it fits perfectly. So I'll go ahead and peel off this plastic cover. Then we'll peel off this 3M backing and then get that stuck onto the actual latch itself. All right, so now that we've got the latch pretty much prepared, now we got to actually prepare the saddlebag, which means we got to take this off and we're actually going to drill a hole in it. All right, so I got the saddlebag all cleaned up, and essentially what we need to do now is drill the hole so that the wire from the latch light can actually come through to get connected to the harness that's underneath the bike, underneath the seat. All right, so about 1 inch down is going to be about right there. And I'm just trying to go about as straight as I can down from this, so kind of going down here. So I marked my spot. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And to drill this, I'm actually going to start with my 3/8 drill bit and work my way up to the 9/16 since it's so big. And I really need 2 hands to make sure I'm even on this. So I'm going to press down. Nice even pressure. Go straight into the bag. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the 9/16 now. Put that big bit in there. Just kind of clean the edges up a little bit. Again, big hole in the bag, but as you can see, pretty clean. And if it took a little bit of paint, which I got a little bit there on the side, nobody's going to see that. There's actually a rubber grommet that's going to go into that hole as well. Kind of similar to these to hold that cable through there so it doesn't cause any chafing as you're riding down the road. So now that we got the hole drilled up through here, now we're ready to go ahead and begin to reattach this latch onto the saddlebag. So now that I've got the latch realigned on there, lined up with the lock, I'm ready to go ahead and put my T15 screws that I originally took out and get those screwed in to hold that latch on there. So now that we've got the latch actually back on there, we can feed our wiring through the hole that we have here. Now we actually have to put this grommet over this wiring, and the reason you don't have the end on this is because you got to feed this through this grommet and then get that grommet jammed into that hole. So you just kind of feed these through, and what I've found is if you do them one at a time, typically you can then get them all through, and you just have to be careful so you don't pull these connections off or cause any problems with those wires getting loose, because that is your ultimate connection into the bike for the lighting. Then once you've kind of got that pushed in, I got that pushed in with my tool here. Just make sure on the other side you get all the little edge pulled through the inside of the bag so that it has a nice tight seal, so that no water gets inside the bag and it's all sealed up. And I've got that. Okay, so now that I've got all the wiring through and I've got that pushed through the harness, we actually need to put this little connector onto these points here. And what I'm going to actually do is show you in the instructions, but you basically need to start with this snap part up, the locking part up, and then there's a sequence that you need to put it into these holes based upon the color. So let me grab the instructions here and I'll show you what that is. This is really important to get this lined up right. So you want to get your locking portion up on that little connector, and then in the one position to the far left is going to be red, next to that yellow, then black, then brown or purple, depending if you're on the right or left side of the bag. In this case, we're going to be brown because we're on the right side. And then when I'm on the other side, which I won't show you, that's going to be the purple on the left side. We're going to get that lined up in that sequence and get those pushed all the way in, and you'll feel them kind of click in. There's little points on there. And what I found is just using my needle nose pliers, I gently push them in the order. Again, red, yellow, black, and then brown in this case, and get that lined up. And then once they're actually in there, they push in, they kind of snap in, and then you'll feel them. They won't come back out, because if you don't get those in the right orientation and locked in, your lights won't work. Now the fun part. We've actually got to get this hooked up so that we can actually get that light to operate. So I want to test it before we do this. So I've got the seat off. I've got a lot of Custom Dynamics lights under here. We've got the bag lights. We've got the magic strobe already hooked up to this. So what we need to do is basically connect this harness that comes in the kit right here that has two ends on it, one for the left, and I've already got the right side hooked up to the bag, and that will be the last thing in line. I got my magic strobe in front of that this is coming from the front of the bike, and this is going to the back of the bike. So there's only one way to connect this. So you connect it up the way that fits in, and then you connect it to what I had disconnected, which was the last thing before that in line, and then that should be set to go. Let's watch this bag. I've got it all connected up, so let's turn the bike on. And as you can see, we have the red running light, so that's good. So now let's do our right turn signal to make sure it flashes yellow on turn. So we're good there. We got a nice yellow flash. Now let's try our brake and see if our magic strobe works. And we have the strobing patterns. All right, so I've got the tether connected back to the bag. I've got the bag bolted onto the bike. So there's a piece here, this little rubber, foam rubber, I need to actually attach around in this area here so that this cord, this wire that's coming off the latch, doesn't rub and fray. So essentially it just needs to sit kind of underneath where that wire will be coming over as you open and close the bag. So I'll go ahead and get that stuck on there. Again, it's just some adhesive there, so just make sure there's no grease in this area, then go ahead and stick that on there and you should be good to go. So now the last thing we need to do is actually connect these little zip tie connectors inside the bag. And what I do is just kind of space them along here, put one here, and stretch this out to kind of the front corner, put one about in there, one here, and so it sort of lines up with where the wire is going out to the bike. And again, there's just a backing on here. Make sure there's no grease around here. Put that on. Use the supplied zip ties. Again, all these are supplied, and then that'll just kind of manage that wiring inside the saddlebag. All right, so I've got the zip tie connectors here, here, and here, as you can see there. So that puts that pretty tightly up against the bag. But what I actually like to do is actually add a little bit of this black gaffer's tape, and I basically just tape that wire down so that it doesn't have any chance of getting caught on anything in the saddlebags. That's just a little touch that I do every time I put these on. Just gives it that a little bit more security, and then I can actually put my saddlebag liners over the top of that and not have to worry about them catching on these zip ties or where I cut those zip ties off. So no issues with that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll wrap this project up. That's the finished product in the dark. So now, as you can see, we have light on the bags. We have light on the front forks. Let's turn on the flashers and see what that looks like. So again, you can't really tell that the front fork lights are flashing, but they are indeed flashing. And now let's do brake lights. So the brake lights will only illuminate the back here. So let's see that. And again, it's hard to tell that those are flashing, but the latch lights are flashing as well. And now back into run mode again. Amber up in the front on those fork lights. And we got the red run in the back on the latch lights. So that's it, guys. We have now eliminated that vulnerability of not having any light on the side of this bike. This is great when you're riding in traffic. If you're like me, I commute, and so I feel much more comfortable when I have turn signals and lighting and brake lights illuminating from the side when you're in bumper-to-bumper traffic. It really just comes down to a matter of safety. If you do both of these projects in one evening, I would give yourself probably at least 2 hours to do this. The other thing I would say, if you're going to choose between the latch lights or the fork lights, I think the latch lights are the biggest bang for your buck because obviously it lights up a lot higher, more where cars would see it. But really having both of those on this bike makes me feel more comfortable, and I actually have the same setup on the other two bikes as well. So now everything is outfitted from a custom dynamics perspective the same, and I have that visibility from front and back and both sides, right and left. Guys, if you got some value out of this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also consider sharing this with your friends so that like-minded individuals who might be interested in some of these custom dynamics lights for your latches or your forks can see this video and see how you do that install on a step-by-step basis. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right down here. That really helps out the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. When you do subscribe for the first time, leave a comment down below saying I subscribe so I can personally reach out and thank you for supporting the channel. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon and select all so you do get notified every time I do put out new content. I have over 250 videos on tips, tricks, rides, reviews, installs on these Harley Davidson touring motorcycles, as well as motorcycle skills playlists. So there's bound to be something that'll either save you some time, you'll learn about a product, you'll learn how to install a product, and save yourself that shop labor at $150 an hour just by watching these free HDVIBE videos. So guys, with that, I want to leave you with this thought. Life is short, get out, ride the bike. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye now.